At dusk in Utah's Wichita Basin, cattle stop moving, the fence wire hums, and a family begins to look at the dark as if it has changed species. Terry and Gwen Sherman said their ranch was no longer just a ranch. It was a place of orange openings in the air, lights pacing a car down empty roads, voices speaking from above their heads, and a wolf so large that Terry later claimed rifle fire barely seemed to matter. The American West has always made room for stories. What made Skinwalker Ranch different is that the stories did not stay local. They attracted money, surveillance, scientists, and years of watching. And still the place refused to become a fact. The ranch lies near the Wichita and Ouray Reservation, in a landscape thick with rumor and older traditions. That detail matters, because the name most people know is already a distortion. Skinwalkers belong to Navajo belief, while the ranch sits beside Ute land, and historians have warned that modern media often flattens those histories into one brand. The modern saga began in 1994, when the Shermans bought the property. By June 30th, 1996, their story was in the Deseret News, a 480-acre ranch south of Fort Duchesne, recurring aerial objects, circles pressed into grass, mutilated cattle, missing cattle, and dogs that disappeared after chasing something into the dark. That article changed the scale of the mystery. The Shermans had already spoken with Joseph Jr. Hicks, a retired Roosevelt schoolteacher who said he had investigated more than 400 UFO sightings in the basin since the early 1950s. Hicks believed the area had produced thousands of reports, maybe enough that more than 10% of the basin's population had seen something unexplained. Then a wealthy believer arrived. In September 1996, Robert Bigelow bought the ranch. He had founded NIDS the year before, hoping to apply cameras, instruments, scientists, and patients to subjects usually left to tabloids. By 1997, researchers had an observation post on the property. John Alexander, working with NIDS, offered the least cinematic line in legend. No UFOs, no ETs, nothing of significance. We don't have anything to work with. That should have cooled the story. Instead, it made it stranger. Because NIDS stayed. Colm Kelleher later described years of surveillance, caretakers, night vision equipment, notebooks, and repeated failures to catch dramatic claims in a form strong enough for science. He wrote about a calf tagged on March 10, 1997, and found 45 minutes later dead, with its body cavity emptied and, by his account, almost no blood at the scene. He described bizarre animals, glowing forms, and a creature seen in a tree 2 nights later. Yet his most important admission was also the plainest. It was very difficult to gather evidence consistent with scientific publication. That sentence may be the real core of Skinwalker Ranch. Not proof, not debunking, just prolonged ambiguity. The aftermath turned that ambiguity into mythology. NIDS disbanded in 2004 after years of trying and failing to capture the supposedly supernatural. Hunt for the Skinwalker helped canonize the ranch anyway. Later, the story drifted into the orbit of ALPSAP and AATIP, where paranormal ranch lore brushed against national security bureaucracy. In its 2024 historical report, ARO said the Utah property tied to that network drew interest not only for unidentified craft, but for shadow figures, creatures, remote viewing, and what it called human consciousness anomalies. In 2016, Brandon Fugel bought the ranch, and by 2020, television had turned it into a mass media engine again. It still has not produced closure. That is why Skinwalker Ranch matters beyond Utah. It belongs to a wider class of cases where investigation does not kill the legend. In Norway's Hessdalen Valley, repeated lights led to instrument stations, and still not to a final answer. In England's Rendlesham Forest, military witnesses and audio recordings left behind a mystery durable enough to become a tourist trail. Skinwalker Ranch followed the same route, only more American. Frontier isolation, private capital, scientific language, folklore, and television, all circling the same absence. Some stories are not solved into meaning. They are published into it, monitored, branded, and handed forward. On this ranch, Dark never had to prove it was haunted. It only had to stay active enough that nobody could quite close the file. If you liked what you watched, please like and subscribe. We post interesting and crazy stories from throughout history every Wednesday and Saturday. Yesterday's craziness? Because yesterday was crazy too.